Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Self-Publishing. I'm your host, Alyssa, and today I am joined by Jennifer Chapin. And Jennifer, I'm so grateful to have you here because not only do you provide a unique perspective from the position of being a publishing consultant with Tell, but you are an author yourself, and you've actually also turned into a mentor for other people who are entering their writing journeys, and I'm really excited to chat with you about that today. So thank you for being here and taking the time. I know you're busy. And I would love if you could just start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, Alyssa, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. And I have to say, in an overall way, the word, without sounding trite, is really central to my life. So to your point, I think I've been writing since I was a very young child. I can't remember a time when I haven't been writing. And I'm an avid reader as well. So my parents really instilled the love of literature into me at a fairly early age and the love of writing. So for me to come together in this current opportunity with Tell for the past 7 years now as a publishing consultant was really, in my view, it's really not work. I mean, I'm getting to talk to authors about their treasures, I learn from them, but I also share my own experiences with them. And I'm also an author. So I've done 2 books, one of which is in Tell. I've got a 3rd book I'm working on that's coming out this year as well. So my background is quite varied and eclectic to some extent. I've got a strong corporate background in hotel management with Fairmont Hotels in Victoria and also in New York City. I basically left New York to go to France to research my first novel in the south of France. And it was actually about Mary Magdalene and the legends around Mary Magdalene in the south of France. And I came back and wrote that. And then fast forward, I saw the opportunity to come on with Tell. In the meantime, I had started working on my novel, The Poet and the Angel, which I bought into Tell a few years before I began my job here. And I just saw it as a great opportunity for me to understand the Tell system firsthand.
Right.
Through the incorporation of my own book. And then that's made it a lot easier to talk to authors as well. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that I'm working exactly in the field that I should be in.
That's amazing. I always love hearing kind of the origin story from our colleagues because I have been here a relatively short time compared to a lot of the people that I've had the pleasure of speaking with through this new podcast opportunity, and the level of expertise and life experience that is kind of all encompassing, within this company is just incredible when you start having these conversations and you learn about the different things. Like I knew about your second book and the themes surrounding it and the travel surrounding that as well. But I'm really interested in the fact that you also had a similar exploration for your first book and with that travel to the south of France. And I just think, the idea of being really boots on the ground to get that inspiration and that knowledge and that firsthand experience is such an incredible thing.
Yeah, and not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to embrace that travel. But for me, it made a great deal of difference. With the Mary Magdalene book, it was kind of around the time that the Da Vinci Code came out, about the bloodline of the Magdalene and Jesus and so on. And I knew that there were a lot of myths and legends in the south of France about her. She's a patron saint of Provence, as an example. But I didn't want that to be hearsay.
Right.
So when I finally left the corporate world, and it was a good timing for me to get out, it wasn't a good fit for me. Ultimately, I was too close to the top of the corporate hierarchy in Fairmont, and it was not a comfortable fit for me. I needed a little bit more independence and less structure. So I quit, and I went over to the south of France with an open mind and open heart. And I think if you're researching a book and it's a book that's passionate to you and the subject matter is passionate to you, you must keep an open mind and an open heart. I spent quite a few months in the south of France. I actually then had a studio apartment in Paris where I started to map out the book. But I rapidly came to understand that she has a very significant presence in the south of France. Who knew? I did not know that until I traveled through Provence and also into Languedoc, where I tied her story into a very important historical event in the 12th and 13th century, which was the crusade by the Catholic Church against the Albigensians, which eradicated them completely.
Right.
Had I just done research here without seeing the landscape, the ancient ruins of the Templar castles, the places where she is purported to have landed coming from Palestine and fleeing Palestine, the place where her basilica was built. I arrived there actually on her feast day, July 22nd. So I was able to go in and be part of that celebration of her life. It would have been speculative and hearsay.
Right.
And so it really gave me a firsthand opportunity, and it caused me also to think, I'm not going to do a Da Vinci Code knockoff here. I'm going to have a bit of a sci-fi time travel twist to it, where I actually have her coming back at the end of time. So it's a reincarnation novel of the return of Mary Magdalene through a young woman, completely irreligious, non-church going, rebel, very outspoken, who starts to get these dreams and visions. And then she's soon walking in two worlds, her world and the world of Yeshua, or Jesus, as well. So it's a sci-fi time travel piece that I ultimately put together. Once I left France, I came back. I wrote it in Nova Scotia, and it was published through an American company at that time. So that was my first foray into fiction.
Right.
I had always been a nonfiction writer. I have a background in political science and government. I was going to go into law, and so my work has always been very clinical and very well researched and very rational and very well thought out. To make the flip into fiction, I did with that first book. So I made all my errors there. Okay,
and
that's a big error, as I realized, but I didn't know it at the time. I was quite naive, and so I just wanted to cut my teeth with that one. By the time The Poet and the Angel came along with Talwell, it was a smoother flow for me to work in the realm of fiction.
And so what initiated that transition and maybe that inspiration into trying your hand at a fiction book in the first place, and with that specific subject matter?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because people may not be aware of is Mary Magdalene is a very topical figure and a very controversial figure in history. And she, in today's parlance of the New Age movement, or in spiritual terms, she's known as representing the return of the divine feminine into the world. And so for me, that's very important because there has to be balance. We've gone too far down a solely patriarchal path.
Right.
When I started sending out the book, I started sending out inquiries to the book. I originally wrote it in nonfiction. And because I've got it drilled into me during university with political science, you have to be analytical, you have to defend your views, you have to give your opinion, it was all quite structured. And I sent it to the New Yorker, and I sent it to a literary magazine in London, England. And they both commented that it was actually, really well done. They really enjoyed it, but the timing wasn't right, and it wasn't for them at that time. The traditional line you get from publishers, right?
Right.
And so I thought, okay, that's cool. At least I've tested this out. But I think I'm going to move it into fiction. So I took the original non-fiction narrative, and I thought, I think this is going to read better in fiction because I can get away with a lot more, right? I mean, in fiction, you can get away with a lot more. I can embellish it. I can add this. I can add that. My imagination comes into play. And she popped out in a way that I didn't even imagine because I allowed my muse to direct the flow of the work of fiction. A very controversial book. It took a lot of bravery for me to bring it out and to do my readings and so on. But I really felt by the time it had come out, she had almost become part of me, and I felt I really needed to get the book out there.
Definitely. And I think that is a really great segue into this conversation where we're talking about authenticity from the perspective of an author's voice. And we're talking about, some of the judgment and the fear that people have putting themselves out there and putting that voice forward. So can you talk a little bit about, first of all, the really unique opportunity that has been presented to you, which is within the prison system and guiding people through their unique experiences and stories and that authentic voice?
I've been doing this probably for a little over a year now, and it was happenstance. I met the facilitator of this prison program at a farmer's market here in Victoria. We were waiting in line to buy our vegetables, and we started talking about writing, and she told me what she did. It's a program for male parolees from maximum and minimum security prisons, and they are recovering alcoholics or substance abusers, okay? And it's really a program that the Salvation Army has put on, and I don't know if this is not like a pitch for Salvation Army, but man, oh man, the programs they put together for this particular group is really awe-inspiring. They really work hard to bring them in-house, feed them, clothe them, house them. They have to be there on parole for it. And I don't question what their background is. None of my business. That's not why I'm there. And they run them through a series of programs to help them to come back and to reintegrate into society. And of course, one of the critical programs that they need to address, a lot of it is done through writing, are their emotions.
Right.
So the particular facet of the program that I got involved with was going in and conducting a writing exercise for them so that they could deal with their emotions, so they couldn't run away from themselves. I didn't allow that to happen. So when I first came in, I was a little bit nervous about it. You know, you walk into a room of 12 to 15 guys, and but they're all very... Yeah, well, to some extent, but you know, I tend to be rather a fearless and intrepid kind of person anyway. Let's go. And so I walked in and, you know, I bought my Towel business cards. I always have a constant supply with me, and I handed them out very respectfully, shook their hands and got their names. And then I got down to business, and I told them that I was going to be walking them through a series of emotions in a writing practice called proprioceptive writing, where they are going to come face to face with themselves and really address their deepest fears, to be perfectly honest with you. And I did a class recently, and to use this as an example, there are 12 of them, and it's usually as quiet as a pin at the beginning. There are a couple of... maybe a couple of rowdies. I close them down fairly quickly. I ask them to be respectful for their neighbor, and this is a dedicated time to write, and please remember that your neighbor's interested in doing this, so please keep quiet. But I also start the exercise by, I think it floors them, okay, because they're not expecting this. I start the exercise by telling them how magnificent they are, that they are multidimensional beings. They're not who society has told them they are. They're not who their families have told them who they are, their religions, their government, anybody. They are unique and special beings that, through a series of circumstances, have allowed themselves to become trapped by fear and ego.
Right.
And I said, you must really work hard to come to the truth of who you are, and this writing exercise will help you. So that floors them, it throws them off completely. I can imagine. Very last thing they expected me to say. And there's nothing religious in there, because I believe this, or I wouldn't be able to talk about it, that we are all pretty magnificent beings, and we're not who we've been trained and conditioned to believe that we are. So, you know, we're much more than that. And so the exercise in proprioceptive writing, it's actually conducted to Baroque music. Baroque music is the one form of music that connects mind to heart, relaxes you, and it's always as a backdrop during the exercise. The exercise is one where I give them a word to ponder. And I always write too. And then the exercise is such that they take that word and they start to write down without stopping what that word means for them. And then at every juncture that they feel is appropriate, they ask themselves the question, what do I mean by that? And then that drills them down into the funnel. Well, what do I mean by that? And that drills them down. See, the thing of it is, Critic does not have an opportunity to speak to them because they're writing constantly. It's writing your mind alive. And so they drill down for 20 minutes, and then I give them a couple of key questions. The Baroque music is playing and so on. First couple of times I tried this, I thought this is not going to fly. But I'm going to give it a good old college try, right? But it does fly. And as I started to write during that recent session, I would look up periodically, and they were all these really tough guys, you know, were all scribbling away. Just immersed
in the experience.
They couldn't stop writing. And then after that, I give them an opportunity to share their stories. I always share mine, and I reveal something about myself every time. I'm authentic in this. I'm vulnerable in front of them. And I share my writing, and then those who wish to share it, share theirs. And over the year or so that I've been doing this, the writing that's come back has been miraculous. The poetry and sci-fi and, verse and anguish. I mean, they're getting to the core of who they are. And in the recent session, I thought initially I thought I'm going to give them a warm and fuzzy emotion like hope. And then when I walked in the room and I took a pulse of the room, I thought, nope, I gave them anger. I want you to write about anger. And so it was so interesting to me because I think that what happens is they can't hide from themselves. They were forced to confront those feelings of anger, what caused it, what brought it up, how far back it went, what they need to do to fix it. And a couple of them shared, and then the room got really silent after a while, and it was before my 2-hour session was up. So I said, well, I really appreciate you sharing, and we can cut this session short if there's no more questions and so on. And they didn't move. They just sat there and they stared at me, right? They didn't move. No one moved. And so eventually they started opening up about, oh my gosh, you've really caused me to realize what I need to work on. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I mean, they were all pretty much uniformly there. And you could see that they were mulling over their own thoughts about what needed to happen. So if I've even opened up the heart of one of those men, you see it's like a seed going through, you plant a seed. That seed is going to grow if they allow it to grow.
Right.
So for me, it's a privilege, to be perfectly honest with you, because I learn a lot from them as well as I learn a lot from my authors. It's not a one-way monologue, it's a dialogue. And that's what I encourage with those guys in that prison system.
And is this technique something that you put into practice personally before exercising it in this group environment, or how did you come to discover that technique as well?
When I worked in New York City, I lived in Connecticut, and because I had a task of building business for the company, for the whole chain in New England. That was my market. So I lived in Connecticut and I used to travel to New England a week a month. And the house that I lived in, I had a suite where she was a proprioceptive writer. The system was formed 2 decades ago in upstate New York at the Omega Institute. It was originally the Omega Institute, a wonderful, wonderful organization. So I was eventually drawn into her writing classes. And what was so interesting to me is inadvertently, because I didn't realize until I was there, I actually moved into one of the wealthiest communities in the U.S. I thought, I just wanted to find a place that looked like Victoria, right?
Yeah.
You know? And so it did. It was right on the ocean. It was really nice, lots of trees. But it was enormously wealthy, full of stars and heads of stockbroking companies and banks. So she would have these sessions with these women, that largely the wives, who many of them didn't work, okay? And they would come and they would look impeccable. Right. Like they're perfectly turned out and very well groomed. And then when she put them, and Polly is her name, she was very low key, very down to the earth, salt of the earth kind of person. And after she put these women through the exercises, I was stunned to see what came out from them. The grief, the anguish, the anger, the sense of only being treated as a bauble in their husbands' lives, the anxiety around that. So I knew it was a very powerful tool, and I did many, many sessions with Polly. And then when I started thinking about the prison program, I knew its effectiveness, and I thought, I'm going to adapt it to some extent, but this is a model that I'm going to use, because it just forces you not to think, to write, and to look at your authentic self right in front of you on the page. So that's the model. That's the backdrop to that writing model.
Have you had any participants from these sessions that you've conducted who have maybe shown interest in exploring their journey through writing further?
Yes, because I always talk about Tellwell. So at the very beginning, I always talk about Tellwell. I explain the company, our backdrop, the fact that we're 10 years old, and the whole consistency of the company and our team members, how global we are, and the form of publishing that it is. And then I do finish, because I've been honored to read some of their work, or they've read it to me, and it's really beautiful. From First Nations people talking about their storytelling to people that have faced unbelievable abuse and tragedy and risen above it. And I think I have encouraged people. They have 2 or 3 of them have reached out to me after the sessions to find out more about the possibility of moving forward with Tellwell.
It has
So
to be
it's a kind
such
of a
a
dual strategy, really. I mean, I'm doing the writing, but I'm here, representing Tellwell at the
right.
same time, right? Yeah,
Absolutely. That has to
very
be
important.
such a rewarding experience,
Yeah.
like
It's
hugely rewarding.
it is because I mean the session I had recently was one of the best I've ever had, and they even followed me out of class, and two of them said they just couldn't believe how much they felt like they'd been slammed in the side of the head by what I said, because I'm a very direct person,
Right.
and they were just really, I mean, they were so thankful that I had done that, and I felt like I could have floated home after that. I feel like if you feel like you've made a difference in the world, I think that's the ultimate achievement for all of us. And it doesn't have to be anything major. It could just
Right.
be walking down the street and smiling at somebody and they smile back. You've already made a difference in somebody's life that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is just such a spectacular purpose. I think just to be able to exist in an environment with other people and to put your own ego away or shield down and walls down and allow for you to initiate that safe space and that safe environment. So, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, you're also a publishing consultant here at Tellwell. How do you navigate helping authors overcome some of that internal dialogue or negative self-talk or that inner critic to really allow for them to embrace this writing opportunity and the publishing journey as well?
Well, I think probably because we all go through those the same internal dilemmas about our work, that I was able to sort of draw upon my own experience and reach out to help them as well. I regard an important part of my practice here within Towel as one of a listener. So I'm not like I am in the prison system. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. And out of respect, I always like to start a conversation with an author, to have them tell me about the story and the backdrop to the story. And I lead them to do that. I love to connect with people, and I can seem to connect with people from all walks of life. That seems to be one of my gifts, and I've had it since I was a child, and I'm really grateful for that gift. And so once I start listening to them, I could hear what they don't say, and I could hear their underlying tension or worry or concern. I don't think I'm good enough, but this is what I've done. And so, but I allow them to tell me their story first, and then I kind of do a little bit of a probe or a deep dive in asking them questions about what their ultimate purpose is, why they wrote the book, what their vision is, how do they envision that they're going to reach out and touch others. So for me, it's a slightly different twist. I've never considered myself a salesperson, even though I've been in sales all my life. It's kind of ironic. I consider it to be more of a caring practice. I think sales back in the old days was pretty crude and pretty straightforward and really had not a tremendously high reputation for its aggressiveness. And we still see that today, and I've never bought into that. I really believe that if somebody feels compelled to use Towel, if they feel it's the right fit, if I've given them sufficient reason to consider Towel, then great. If they have sufficient reason to go and self-publish or they find another solution, then great. I only want what's the best for them.
Right.
But if I could take the time to listen to them and then develop that relationship with them, I seem to be able to sort of get to the heart of them fairly quickly and have them uncover some of their distress points about making their voices heard and bringing it out into the marketplace.
I think you're right in that that is a very unique gift and one that not many people either recognize within themselves or maybe even have at their disposal. And I think that, it's a unique perspective to be able to provide to an author to say, I've also been on this journey and I've gone through the self-publishing process and I can, offer my own insights from that perspective, but I can also offer the insights from the perspective of somebody who is, has maintained this amazing I think, self-awareness and the ability to identify some of your own maybe pain points or struggles that you have also dealt with and overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to think about a lot of our writers, especially in the memoir genre, but arguably even in fiction, arguably even in children's books, as we don't come out of the head of Zeus fully formed. I mean, we're all, to some extent, wounded healers. Life is about overcoming challenges, meeting them and overcoming them. So we all have our own personal story of these internal demons that we need to overcome. And I'm no different from anybody else. I tell the people in the prison system, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had to work hard to get to where I am. And I think I encourage them to bring their voices out, because I said, consider yourself as a wounded healer. You don't know who you're going to touch when you bring your book out. And as Tim Lindsay, our CEO, has said, even if you touch the heart of one person, you've been successful. If you're writing from a point of authenticity and talking about your own experiences, you're going to automatically reach the heartstrings of those who have gone through it, or, can resonate with others that they know in their world that have gone through it. And that's why I'm quite adamant about people writing from the heart of who they are, and not writing through a machine like AI. I mean, you and I both know we've got a wonderful author here, Heather Stuka, who wrote about her son Ryan, who was missing. They've never found his body. He's been missing for 5 years. How do you think that story would have come out if she'd done an AI-generated narrative?
Right.
Stilted, artificial, completely irrelevant, and it wouldn't have touched anybody. As it turns out, she's one of our top billed authors because she's writing from a point of authenticity and pain.
Right.
You see, we all come from that point. It doesn't matter who we are. We've got challenges that we've had to overcome, and we can weave that into our narratives and really touch people. And that's really what I try to stress to my authors, that you're like yeast in dough. You don't know it's going to rise, but you don't know where it's going to rise. And don't look over your shoulder to see if people are going to judge you, or you're worried about the marketability of the book. Just focus in on getting your story out there, and everything will definitely fall into place with our expertise. With our editors, with our wonderful marketing people. You've got to have that balance. And that's where Talwal comes in, to make their voice strong and to give them all the assistance that they can to be successful.
Absolutely. I think, I've had conversations with some of our colleagues, including more recently Simon Ogden, who is our managing editor. And the conversation very much kind of was oriented around the idea that an author often comes in thinking that an editor is there to pick apart their work or rewrite their work. And they're very much a member of the author's team. Their job is to represent the reader of the work. And oftentimes we, as writers, I think, write from a place of what we know and what we've experienced. And because that's something so deeply personal and just innate to who we are as beings, we don't necessarily think about, the gap between this structure and this structure, or this timeline and that timeline, because we know it. We know it intimately. And the job of an editor is to view that as a reader and say, but I can't, make that connection, or, we do need to kind of flesh this out a little bit. And I think once you kind of understand the role that each member of our team plays, whether that's a publishing consultant, project manager, marketer, editor, once you understand that they are all here to support the author in their journey to getting their work out there in its best and truest form, that's really when the magic starts to happen.
Yeah, and I totally stress that, Alyssa, and you're 100% right. I mean, I tell them that, you're in a safe environment here. We're going to guide you through the process. Your project manager is going to be attached to your hip. They're going to be a guiding light for you. And you're going to meet team members that are working to make your book the best it can be. And to your point, I think editing is so critical. We've all put down books that have contained glaring editing errors or spelling errors and so on. Because at that point, if it's not well edited, you're breaking trust with the reader and you've lost credibility. Well, the beauty of our team, and which Simon heads, and all of the editors, is that they're making their voice stronger. They're not taking it away. And I reinforce that immediately. And I also reinforce the value of marketing, because you don't want it to be the world's best kept secret. I tell everybody, your book is too good. You've got such a great message. Don't let it die. Let us help you to get your visibility and get your voice out into the marketplace so that you can take charge of the book. We're not, you are an authorpreneur. You are in charge of your book and your own success, but you've got a team that is working with you. And I think the value of Towel is that we're a mid-sized company, but we're intimate still. We haven't lost that sense of intimacy and caring. And those are the qualities that Tim Lindsay brought into play when he created the company 10 years ago.
Right.
And I've been here 7 years. I've seen the morphing and the evolution of this company. It's really quite astounding. But those core values of ethics, integrity, transparency, customer service, honoring our passion and the passion of the authors has always remained constant. And I think they need to know that they're going to be safe. This is their child. Right. Yeah. And if they need to know that they're going to go into an environment where they're honored and their voices are heard and they're going to be safe. And I feel that that's what we provide, that kind of an incubator for them to get their ideas out into the world. So, yeah.
Are there any standout projects to you that come to mind where, there has been that initial level of hesitancy that you've really seen blossom and transform through the process?
Yeah, there's an author from Iran who lives in Vancouver, and he wrote a book about the work of fiction about the women's revolution at the time when the women were rising up in Iran, and they were being imprisoned and brutalized and faced a lot of dire consequences from the government. So I suspected when I talked to him that this was really his story. He wrote about a love that he left behind in Iran. So you can imagine the trepidation that he would feel coming out into the marketplace, given the volatility of that government's and its approach towards those who speak out, intellectuals, artists, women. So we tiptoed in, okay? So definitely he said, pen name. I said, no question about that, pen name, noted. And I said, well, why don't you start with an editorial evaluation? It's going to be a way for the editor to read through what you've got and to make some suggested changes. We don't have to put together a package for you. Depending on what she says, or he or she says, let's move on from there. So he actually partnered with a brilliant editor, and she really encouraged him, thought the book was beautiful. And she said, if you decided to move forward with it, she said, I'll be your editor, and we'll work together to really craft this narrative for you. So he had a lot of trust in her. And right. It was that relationship with her that caused him then to come forward to do a full-blown edit, to do a full-blown package, and always under an assumed name. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful book, a beautiful story. So, you can think about the bravery that it took him. Because, who knew how much his identity would be protected, and the bravery it took him to talk about. And it's really interesting. Here's a man from Iran talking about the women's revolution and championing that through the loss of somebody that he loved, who was left behind in Iran. Right. So if you think that's going to touch people, it's going to touch everybody, and not just people from Iran. Anybody who's lost somebody will feel him. So, I think our authors are enormously brave. I call them my superheroes. Like, you're so brave to bring this out. This is not for the faint of heart.
Right.
I applaud you. Now let us help you to polish this so that it could be the strongest book that we can create together.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that, the process is often misunderstood by many who haven't yet taken the leap to have that initial conversation, and they think of self-publishing or they think of assisted self-publishing, and they don't really understand that guided process that is offered and those relationships that are formed often between publishing consultants and authors, or project managers and authors.
Definitely.
And, one of the things that I really find to be special about Talwell is the celebratory nature of our colleagues when it comes to seeing their author successes, seeing the way that they're winning awards, or not even to that scale, but having a book signing event or doing a reading at a school or a library. And, we celebrate everything internally and also externally through, social media, newsletters. And I just think that is such a special thing that really kind of encompasses who we are as a company and what our culture is like.
Definitely, I totally agree with you. And that a thing that maybe I haven't shared enough with my own colleagues is the fact that because our website is so well laid out and it's so content rich, that's their first point of contact with us. And if they've got something that they really want to entrust a publishing company with, a lot of them go with their gut feel. And when I read your website, when I looked at your team, when I looked at how well laid out it was, I thought I've got to talk to people in this company. And arguably, that's how I felt when I first applied for this job. I went into the website. It wasn't as fleshed out as it is now, but it told me enough about the heart of the company. And I think that the fact that we've maintained that integrity all the way through with a brilliant team from all over the world who are equally vested in the success of their authors. And I think, so they're drawn in by the website because I think it's very beautiful now. It's evolving. But then they're drawn in by the relationships. And yeah, I mean, publishing consultants, like we're warm and fuzzy, we're relationship builders by nature, So, if they trust us enough and we feel that we can match their budget point and we can create a good estimate for them, and they know that they've got full copyright, no one's going to mess with their stuff except to make it stronger, then that's comforting enough for them to come in. And then when I pass the baton over to a trusted project manager, that relationship continues so that the production cycle can fulfill itself. So it's all about trust, but a lot of it does start with their vibe of who we are. They vibe on our vibe. And if they didn't vibe on our vibe, they wouldn't be reaching out to us. So It's, it all works together. All the different parts of all of our associates kind of work together. It's kind of like one organic unit that kind of flows from one to the other, definitely. Yeah.
The saying birds of a feather really feels appropriate in this point in the conversation, because the website or the brand or the voice or that vibe that you referred to that drew you into the company, and then other people who also resonate with that brand voice and the culture are also drawn into the company, and then those people are drawing in people who are also gravitating towards the same kind of value system and core belief system. And I think that's one of the reasons that our company is so great at what it does, but also one of the reasons that our authors are just incredible at what they do, whether they're out there producing works because they want a cherished memento to pass down to their family, or they do want to have some sort of influence in a specific space, or they want to educate. Everybody comes in with such a beautiful and pure intention, I think, to achieve the same goal. And when you have that many people rooting for you and working together and pulling in the same direction, really wonderful things can happen.
Yeah, and like I alluded to earlier, when an author reads his or her work and it's like seeds planted, so it is with us. And you pointed that out correctly, that, a lot of our work is referrals. Someone got their book done by you and they said it was an amazing experience, and that's why I'm reaching out to you. So yeah, I mean, I think if we did shoddy work, or if we as publishing consultants were the old-fashioned salespeople that didn't care at all about their work, were just trying to grab their money and run, or if there were gaps in communication and they didn't feel that anyone cared about their work, we wouldn't be in business, right? So, I mean, I think to build a company like this over the last 10 years very systematically indicates that I believe this personally, and I believe this is true for Towel, you have to have a foundation of solid values that everyone needs to buy into, and we celebrate those values when we get together as a team in our general assemblies and so on. If you don't have that foundation, then you haven't got a basis from which to grow, and to grow your own personal business as a team member or with your author, or to grow as a company. So yeah, I think that's in place.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I've really enjoyed and appreciated this conversation. I do have one last question for you for our user-submitted segment, The Plot Thickens. If you aren't currently, please give us a follow on Instagram at Towel Publishing. You have the opportunity to submit questions for our guests every single week. The question that we have here is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is starting out in writing, particularly those who do feel insecure about their voice?
I think it's important to create sanctuary. What do I mean by that? I mean by that you need to separate yourself out from the cacophony of the world. And that could be critics in your backyard. It could be the noise of society. It could be what other authors are writing about. You need to, in order to find your voice of authenticity, you need to find a secluded, sacred space where you go into. And I'm not talking woo-woo. I'm not talking religion. I'm talking about taking some time every day just to really go inside and listen to your own authentic voice, your own inner muse. And I also think that you have to honor that voice as it's being presented to you. We all have an inner muse and an intuition and so on. And I think one of the authors that I love very dearly is Isabel Allende out of Chile. And I've read all of her novels. She's 80 and she's not going to stop anytime soon. And they're all award winners. And I once did a podcast with her, watched her and heard her. And she says, if you don't write about something that you deeply love, if it doesn't come from your heart, then don't write at all. Absolutely don't write to make money. Money will be there, and I believe that too. If you've written from your heart and you've filtered out all those voices and those critics, which could be yourself, really honored your inner voice and then brought it out for reasons of love and authenticity, the money shall follow. Because when we're passionate about something, there's nothing we want to talk more about except that person, that passion, that project. And so it's going to be a natural extension of who you are. And therein lies your success. But don't listen to others who may be well-intentioned or who may be envious of the fact that you have the temerity to write a book. Just close them all off, focus in on your inner muse, write from your heart, don't use AI, and get it all out there, and the money shall follow. But don't make money your predominant focus.
I think that is great advice and a great place for us to wrap up this conversation. I have a couple of fun rapid fire questions for you, and then we can get back to the fun that is awaiting you for the rest of your day here, which I'm sure is full of more insightful and inspiring conversations with authors. So first up for rapid fire, are you a hard copy or an e-reader person?
Hard copy. I like the tactile nature of a book, curling up in a chair with a tea and just, feeling the book, definitely.
Amazing. And do you write routinely or when inspiration strikes?
I'm an inspirational writer through and through. I'm not one of the ones that sits down every day with a practice. It's as my muse inspires me to write.
Amazing. I love that. And what is one thing at your writing station that you can't be without?
I have crystals at my writing station. Yeah, I love art, so I'm surrounded by a lot of beauty in terms of art. That's very important to me, to live in a beautiful place, and I feel I've succeeded with doing that. So, sacred symbols, it could be Kuan Yin, or it could be Lord Buddha, or it could be angels. So I feel like it's all adds to the sacredness of my space, and in that space, I feel that I'm kind of comforted, and I can bring forth the best version of myself.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again, Jennifer. I have enjoyed this conversation, and I hope all of our listeners have as well. If you aren't currently, please give us a follow and a subscribe. Continue listening wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Thank you.